Hello and welcome everybody to the UK Crime Book Club live chat. I'm Ben Bruce, and joining me today, I've got Justine Gilbert, the author of The Daisy Chain, Montecatini, I hope I pronounced that right, and now her latest novel, The Anna Puzzle. Justine, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me here.
How are you? Are you all well? It's not been raining where you are today, has it? Or
Yes, I'm in the south of England. It's raining. It's rainy
you've got the
today.
rain. We've not had the rain today, so I wondered where it had gone. I knew it wouldn't be far away. So there's always somewhere. Before we obviously bog down in the weather, we're here today. Rundown of it, please.
Sorry, you cut out for me there a little bit.
Sorry.
Can you ask the
I'm
question
happy to
again?
do that. Yeah, any point I cut out,
Yeah.
do just make me repeat myself. Often people say I do repeat myself anyway, so that's just an occupational hazard. Yeah, The Anna Puzzle, as we can see behind me there, is your latest novel. It came out in January. Justine, tell us all about it.
Okay, The Anna Puzzle is a dual timeline story, and my aim when I was writing it was to outline what had happened in the end of the Cold War, not the Cold War, but at the end of the Cold War, and then the time leading up to what I call the Hot War, which is 2022. So there's a 30-year gap. It's sort of 1991 to 2021, and the stories run either side of that 30-year gap. But what actually inspired me to write it initially was a very odd combination. I had just read Anna Karenina very late in life. I never read it. It was a classic text that I didn't read when I was younger. And the reason I read it is someone said no one's ever updated this book. And I thought, why? They've done updates of Pride and Prejudice, Ad Infinitum, they've done the Jane Eyre, they've done all of that. They've never done any sort of alteration of Anna Karenina. But at the same time, I had my first set of Ukrainian guests come to stay with me. And I felt a little bit of a conflict. I'm reading this Russian 19th century text, and I've got Ukrainian people who've just fled from the beginning of the war staying with me in my house. And so I had this idea that there would be a character, Anna. And Anna would not be Russian, let alone 19th century. She would be English, an English woman. And she would meet not a Russian Count Vronsky, but a Ukrainian ex-soldier who was his surname was Vronsky. So that was the first strand, the 2021 strand, that I could see there was something to play around with, the eternal triangle, and the woman is married, although her marriage is cooling, it's very unhappy. And that there was something to play around with there. And then at the same time, I was thinking about the ending of the Cold War. I've been to Berlin many, many times, and always, in Free Berlin that was joined. And once when
We've
I was there, I met
we've
a
just lost
guy.
you a moment there, Justine.
Sorry.
So, do you mind? We got up to the point where you said you've been to Berlin many, many times. So, if you just pick up from there, we just had a little bit of blue screen come in for you.
Okay. I've been to Berlin many times,
Mhm.
and one time I was there, I met with a guide who was an East German woman. She had been a child in East Germany, and she said, "You realize that when the wall came down, there was no celebration for us. We were terrified. All the propaganda, we were convinced we were going to go hungry. We'd have no medical care. We'd have no jobs. We'd be, out in the streets." And that was what they genuinely believed. And so it made me think that there's something that the West had never explored, which was the
Mm.
attitude of the people when the curtain came down. Was always hurrah, McDonald's is in Moscow, great. Didn't really understand where it was from the point of view of all those countries that we now think of as the Eurovision Song Contest countries, Estonia and Latvia and all of those, and Ukraine, that in fact all their jobs were connected to the Russian state. The Russian state pulled all the jobs out, and there was huge poverty. So I had that story on one side, and the story of the 2021 girl meeting her updated Ukrainian Count Vronsky.
Mhm.
and I wanted to put them together as, I suppose I wanted to draw the strands together to say the one has caused the other, that this is what has actually happened, is that the true history hasn't been told. But it was never going to be a historical book because history has to be, this is a fact, historical fiction has to be more than 50 years old. And this is
Mhm.
also recent. It's all
Yeah.
like I can remember watching TV and the Berlin Wall coming down. So I thought, right, we're going to write this story. And why is it crime? Well, it's very much, I guess, my influence as a writer is Le Carre. I am a
Mm.
big Le Carre fan. That sort of slow burn. I'm not into, the high action Jack Reacher, Tom Cruise sort of
Yeah.
fiction. I mean, it's not that I don't enjoy the films, but I'm not into that kind of fiction. And I wanted this sort of slow burn novel where what you were looking at is who can you trust? And I
Mm.
think that's incredibly relevant for today. And I wrote this book sort of 2 years ago, and then I spent a year editing it and adjusting it, and I researched it extensively. I got very obsessive
Mm.
about it. I read all kinds of non-fiction books connected to the Cold War and connected to the Ukrainian War. And it became a sort of, you've got to leave this out. It's a fictional novel. Leave this out, leave this out, leave this out. It was like twice its length, and I'm chucking stuff out, trying to make it, this is a crime novel.
Mm.
Someone gets murdered. There is espionage. There are all those threads that have to go through. But in that came the fact that it's just so topical. It became more and more topical, if you like, because when I started it, my Ukrainian guests, who have since moved on, but I remember
Mhm.
them saying to me, well, the war's got to end. It's going to end next year. So my first ending for this book is nothing like the ending that's there, because as I went on each time, it's like, oh no, that hasn't happened. That hasn't. Okay,
Yeah.
so now we adjust it again and again. So yeah, beware contemporary novels linked to real life, because the news catches up with you and you're like, oh, I can't write that. I
So
have to
you were
stay.
preempting the end of the war then in an original draft. Did it have that sort of?
Uh,
I
I
don't want to
think,
hack it.
yes, I think
Yeah.
I thought that there would be some resolution,
Mm.
whereby Anna, well, in Anna Karenina, those people, you don't have to have read it to
No.
read the book at all,
I,
because I
I
did
did
have,
contemplate reading it for this chat, but when I saw the page count, I realised I simply did not have room in my TBR pile to get
it's
done
a
in time.
brick. It's a brick. Right at the beginning of the book, I refer to the fact that this KGB agent finds Anna Karenina in 8 volumes. And that's
Yes.
because it is 8 books put
Yeah.
together in one. It's a brick. It's like Robert Galbraith. She writes
Mm.
books to bricks. So, yes, it's the same thing. It's a brick. But and War and Peace. We know what Tolstoy was
Yeah.
like. So no, no, no. You don't have to have read Anna Karenina, but for people who have, spoiler alert, it
Mm.
ends very unhappily. She dies, and I remember reading that thinking, oh God, this guy was so misogynist. Take it into the 21st century. It can't end like that. There's no way Anna's going to go off and throw herself under a train. Nuts to that. That's not going to happen. So I knew that I didn't want that sort of an ending for it, if I was going to be updating elements of the book. But at the same time, how do you have a happy ending where a woman is in love with a man who goes to Ukraine and war breaks out?
Mm.
Essentially, the week he goes back, war breaks out. How do you have this happy ending when I'm ending it in 2022? How can that be happy? What can I do with it? So that was very creative. I mean, it had to be realistic because
Mm.
it's crime fiction and it is not meant to be fantasy. But I had to be very creative to find that element. And oddly enough, some of that element was given to me through Zelensky's speeches. He does very stirring speeches, and there were a few things that he said. And one of the things that came through time and again is love is stronger than war. And if you
Mm.
think of all the people around the world who are caught up in wars, in different countries, what keeps people going? I mean, sadly, some people keep going because of hatred. Hate
Yeah.
fuels them. But I think for many people, love is what keeps them going. Love and care for their family, their brothers, their sisters, their parents, to try and rescue them and save them. That is what keeps them going. So I wanted that kind of message to come through amidst everything else,
Mm.
amidst
And
all the rest of it.
I'm going to say, honestly, I think you talk about the challenge you face with the ending. You stuck the landing, as they say. I mean, I will give nothing away about the ending, but you definitely managed to tie up in a very convincing way, in a very what felt real and unforced way, this storyline within, like you say, there's a sprawling conflict that is still ongoing in the real world. It still felt like you had a really perfectly put together resolution. So it's interesting to see how many different, the different challenges you faced in getting to that point and actually resolving it in a way that definitely works. So congratulations to you on that, because not knowing how to end, I often find writing the hardest part is knowing where the end point lies. And that's just within the construct of my own universe, never mind a real life thing that is pushing along all the way. So yeah, that must have been an interesting challenge. And speaking of challenges, you've said already this is a novel with dual timelines. How much of a challenge is that as a writer, connecting these disparate stories in terms of where they're set within a timeline, but obviously connect, make them feel relevant to each other throughout the story, rather than coming to the end point and going, oh, that's how it comes together. These two storylines always felt intermingled throughout. That's how did you set about tackling that?
Well, I think I had two authors in mind, but one of them was Liz Fennick, who very
Mm,
much writes dual timeline stories that I'd read, and one has to bounce off the other. So in my 2021 story, Anna knows nothing.
mm,
But in the 1991 story, the reader knows. So I think it is a bit of that Columbo effect. How is she going to find out? You know what's
yeah.
happening, and she doesn't know. And how is she going to find out? When is she going to find out? Is she going to find out? So I like the idea of the reader being that little bit wiser than the character. I think some people do it the other way round. It's like you
Mm,
haven't got a clue, and everybody else knows, and you're running around trying to guess who done it. But I quite like Columbo model.
yeah.
Well, you don't totally know, but you sort of know. You have a pretty good feeling for what's happening. So, in that way, you're wiser than Anna is. But I also felt that the chance for the 1991 story was to lay the groundwork for why the arrangement of the ending of the Cold War actually was never an ending.
Mm,
And in that, again, I go back to Le Carre, who was very strong in all of his books with this one idea. And Le Carre was in the Secret Service, so he knew once you're in the Secret Service, they never let you go.
mm,
So this idea that, if you worked for them, if you did a little work for them, you are never free. You can say you've retired or you can say you've gone off to do other things. You are never free. They can call on you at any time because the rules for them are completely different to the
mm,
rules for, if you get arrested for shoplifting, you're entitled to a phone call. You are not entitled to a phone call if you were arrested on for espionage or treason. So it's completely different. So in linking the two stories together, it was this Columbo effect, plus the fact that the way they're living and what's happening to them is just completely different to the way everyone else is living. But you, the reader, are just that little bit wiser as you go along, and Anna gradually tries to piece things together and get a bit wiser too. And she has a lot to discover. And in terms of that, I want to say I had a wonderful beta reader, a lady who worked in the UN. We just sort of met online,
mm.
and she gave me her manuscript and I gave her mine. And she had a wonderful story all based on corruption in Africa and the Hague Court. But when she read mine, she said, Anna would know more than this. Nobody would be like her. I mean, she'd know X, Y, and Z. And I said, you work for the UN. You have no idea how little people know. They don't know
Mm. No.
that this character of this young 30-something woman she thinks locally. She's
Mm.
interested in parking wars, and her child prefers the grandparent to her, and little things locally absorbed. I'm absorbed in sewage wars and the council and things like that. We don't think globally. We can't. As human
No.
beings, we have to think locally. So when something very big comes along, geopolitical, that affects you, it's eye-opening. And this happens to Anna, that she has no idea. She doesn't even know really anything about Ukraine or whether Ukraine is Russian or not. And before anyone says to me, well, everybody will know that, Ukraine isn't Russia, think back to 2020. I assure you, a lot of
Mm.
people thought that Georgia and Ukraine were like Kent and Surrey.
Yeah.
They were just little things attached to Russia. They didn't know because we're more absorbed with local things. So Anna has to go through that journey of waking up to a wider world because she's fallen in love with a man who's from another country. And I think that experience, to anyone who has loved someone who's outside their culture, is actually very common, that you don't know. You don't know, you have to find out. So,
I,
yeah, I
yeah,
rejected.
and I do. Yeah, I
Sorry.
do want to talk a little bit about Anna because, as a character, she goes on an incredible journey. She goes from really almost extremely innocent at the beginning of the story, and as you said, she goes on this journey, but she's not always supported. And I felt often she wasn't even treated as an equal by the people around her. I think there's a lot of people who look down on her and don't help her and sort of hinder her, or perhaps don't believe that she can do these things. And in the end, she continues and she perseveres and she finds a way to achieve what she wants to do, which is, a number of things as the story unfolds. But talk to me about the inspirations behind the character of Anna and what made you want to write her the way you did, and how you feel about her and her growth in the story.
Well, oddly enough, it was something my daughter said to me. So we're 2022, and
Mm,
I have Ukrainian guests come to stay with me. And my daughter lives in America. She's
mm,
married to an American. She lives in America. And, I said, I've got, this awful thing has happened. And these people have come to live with me. And she went, Mama, I don't understand. Ukrainians are Russian. And I went, just don't say that to a Ukrainian. They'll go mad. She said, but they
mm.
speak Russian. And I said, you're right, let's just wise up a bit. But my daughter she's not political. She's really not
Um,
interested. She's got a small child, that takes up all her time. And I do get that.
mm,
But she's also very successful. And I thought, well, here's somebody, and my daughter's 40. Here's somebody who's successful, has a child, and she doesn't know a thing. So why shouldn't Anna, who's like 10 years
mm,
younger, why shouldn't she be like that? So I when at the beginning I say things like Anna, didn't really know about Ukraine, and she was used to not watching the news. She watched Friends on YouTube and things like that, because that is what the generation coming through are like. They don't watch television news. They
mm,
catch up on social media, and social media is tailored to what they want. So if they don't want to know what's going on, they don't find out. There are fewer and fewer common experiences. So I felt the character of Anna was reflective of quite a few people of her generation. So
mm,
that's where I started from. But I also felt that as a result, because she was married to a much older man, he would look down on her. He's not unkind, he's not cruel,
no,
but he works in Westminster. I mean, he says he works in the Foreign Office, but you begin to have doubts about where he works. But the point is, she doesn't know. Now, when I first sort of put that character out there in the stratosphere in a writing group, I remember a number of women saying to me, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. Everybody knows what their husbands do, and husbands know what their wives do. They all know." And one guy, it was in a chat room with about 20 people, sort of put his hand up and said, "Actually, my wife has no idea what I do." And he then
timing.
he then put out his job title, which meant nothing. It was one of those job
Sorry,
titles.
Justine, you just froze again when you were explaining what he did. So yeah,
He put out a job title that meant nothing to anybody in that chat room. It's like, what's that? He said, well, exactly. And I tried to
yeah,
tell my wife what I do, and she glazes over. She's just not interested. She has no idea what I do. You know, we're,
got the paycheck. Happy days.
yes, I mean, we're together, we're okay, but she doesn't know and she doesn't care. I bring in the money. And I thought, okay, so it's not so far fetched that she
Mm,
wouldn't really know what her husband does. So all the time that I'm writing, I'm testing the water. What about this character? What about this
mm,
character? So I think Anna is born out of feeling that I've actually met people and spoken to people where this is a true scenario. And
yeah.
and again, I go back to John le Carre. his 2018 book, Agent Running in the Field, which was a book club choice book.
Mm,
It's his wife knows that he does this sort of secret servicey type of job, but they make a point of not talking about it. So,
mm,
you can know that your husband is working on something that's top level secret, and you can also know that he can't talk about it and you can't talk about it, or vice versa. It could be the
yeah.
wife and the husband, but there is that agreement within marriages. The difference with Anna is she doesn't have that agreement. She's, because there's such a big age gap, because he's 20 years older, he doesn't make an agreement with her, he just doesn't tell her. And so the novel is partly about betrayal. In the 1991 story, there's big betrayal going on. And in the 2021 story, there's betrayal. And the question is it just Anna betraying her husband with the lover? Or has, in fact, her husband been betraying her for a long time?
Yeah.
There's a lot of betrayal. There's also her brother and his wife.
Mhm.
The wife is having an affair. Betrayal is a very big theme in this book, and it's how well do you know the people you live with?
Oh,
How
I didn't trust any of them by the end of it.
I know. Well, I mean, to my mind, it's what makes a good book. If you trust
Oh,
everybody and
yeah.
nobody misbehaves, you haven't got a
Yeah.
novel.
There's no story there, is there? It's just, yeah. But no, and their relationships with each other again. It added that. I'm trying to think of the right term. I don't want to say sort of soap opera because that isn't what I mean. But it felt like a real interaction, a real sort of family bond between people. But more than that, their lives felt well lived within each other's spheres, but also outside of it, they all felt really well rounded characters. And I think that added to, especially in the modern plot, that sort of intrigue about everyone. Everyone seemed to have a little secret, but they weren't necessarily big secrets, were they? They weren't grand secrets. They were just everyday secrets that people had, and that just made the whole tapestry of their lives much richer.
There were a lot of secrets,
Mm.
but I think some of them were very big secrets.
Oh, obviously, yeah.
You know, at the same time, I think I want to say what I did a lot of research
Mm.
before writing. Well, no, not before writing the novel, during my first draft,
Mm.
and then adjusted it. And one of the things I did was I bought tickets to see Christo Grozek
Yeah.
in conversation with a journalist in London. Now, he's been on BBC Radio today because he was the guy Navalny called the Sherlock Holmes of digital forensic researchers. He found out that Navalny had initially been poisoned with Novichok in his underpants. And you might say, how could you possibly find that out? But he found that out, and he was talking today, obviously, about the news that Navalny was
Sorry,
poisoned.
Justine.
Sorry.
Sorry, we just lost you again when you said, just as you said, how can you possibly find out? Again, you just a little
Okay.
freeze there, unfortunately.
So he's a very, very clever guy. And he said
Mm.
one thing in this interview that I will never forget. He looked at the whole audience and he said, "You think you know how the world works. You're going about your everyday life and you think because, you're intelligent and you're informed that you know how the world works." And he said, "You have no idea how 1% of the people live, and they do not live by the rules." And I think since the Epstein scandal has got bigger and bigger, it is beginning to come to our attention, me, an ordinary person.
Hmm.
I had no idea. I had no idea how these people lived, how they got away with quite literally murder. I
Yeah.
had no idea. And that idea fascinated me, that there is a lot going on that we know nothing about. So in the book, I wanted this sense that there are people doing things and people, organizing for somebody to be here or there, or things to happen, and
Mm.
we have absolutely no idea that it's going on. So I mean, it's the stuff of thrillers. If I were to write a book tomorrow that had a man killed in Russia by the poison of a South American frog, I know some critic would say to me, that's too bloody far fetched,
Yeah.
excuse my language, because that is what it would be. And yet these things are beginning to unpeel, partly through
Mm.
social media and new technologies. We are actually seeing things that for years were not seen. And I feel some of that is in my novel, particularly with modern espionage. How is
Mm.
modern espionage affected? And I just thought it's fascinating. And obviously, the story has to be wrapped around people. It
Yeah.
can't just. It's not a fiction. It's not a non-fiction book. But at the same time, these people's lives are being affected by things over which they have no control. And I guess that, to me, was one of the most fascinating things about it. That
Mm.
that's the puzzle. What's going on? She has no control over. She rises to the challenges because she feels she has to. This is something
Yeah.
she has to do. And would think at the beginning of the book she can't possibly do that. And I would like to think that we can all rise to that challenge. We can all say, actually, now I've found out I'm going to do something about it. Of course, most people prefer not to. That's why
Mm.
you read fiction, so someone else can do it for you.
There are a couple of times in the book where I was internally screaming, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" Because she just tries to take some quite incredible risks at times, but it's that determination to get that end result, isn't it? And perhaps pushing herself out of a comfort zone that means she takes risks that I sat there. I would never imagine doing what she's about to do, without wanting to give away any parts of the plot. But she is willing to do that, and she 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 becomes quite a courageous character very quickly as the book goes on. When she starts taking risks, I think she begins to feel empowered, doesn't she?
I also think it's that sense of that nobody supports her or takes her seriously. I think she's enraged by it. I think,
Sorry,
for,
Justine, can you just start that one again?
yeah,
It always wants to freeze when you start an answer, which is handy because it means it's easy to go back to. But yeah, just start that one again for me.
I think she is enraged by the fact that people don't take her seriously, or
Mm.
they're
Yeah.
throwing things at her and, just sit in your corner and be quiet. And I think, to be honest, every woman, I think, knows what that feels like. I think this is very much a male female thing. Every woman knows what it's like to say something and be told, there, you're patted down,
Mm.
while a man will steam through and do it. I'd like to think in the next, 20 years that will lessen, but certainly my experience throughout life and in my working life has been that it takes the rare woman who's absolutely out there and very dominant to begin with. That's their
Mm.
personality. The majority of women, they are taught from a young age about compliance and behaving in the classroom and being studious and so on. And it goes through. And the few that rebel are the few. The majority are not like that. But I think you get to a point, particularly in this century, fortunately, we have got to a point where women have suddenly gone, no, I'm not accepting that. In the 20th
Mm.
century, despite, the feminism and the burn the bra, I still think for an awful lot of them was the exception, not the rule, to get through. They talked about the glass ceiling. For Anna, she's still well under the glass ceiling. She has been undermined since she was young. And part of that is because she lost her parents, which in the first chapter that she's an orphan, um, and she has to find that she has courage and that she
Mm.
can do things. And of course, it's back to that theme of love is stronger than war. She
Mm.
loves him, and she is determined to do something about the fact that he's disappeared, with people accusing him of being, different
Mm.
things of which no one can provide absolute evidence of their accusations, but she's determined to find him. And that determination, that sense of love, makes her brave. And I think it does. I think for people who are in situations of great stress, who may have been absolutely just quiet, maybe even sheepish people, cross them over somebody they love, and they find their strength.
Mm.
If something happens to someone they love, they find their strength. And that's particularly true, I think, with women.
Yeah.
So
It's
that's
it's 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 a fantastic motivator, and it's interesting here because writing. I mean, I tend to write male sort of thriller figures, and one of the tropes that I tend to try and avoid is the man who's
You've cut out.
that you're
You
told to try.
cut out for me.
Yeah, but it's a trope that you're told when you're writing male fiction to try and avoid. But like you say, when you talk about motivations for a character, there's nothing stronger than love. There is absolutely nothing stronger than love as a reason to go and push yourself to that extra level. There are precious few things that actually tick all the boxes when you're thinking of a character, and why would they put themselves in the most perilous of situations? More often than not, it is only because of love. And in some ways, I do feel it's a rule that should be booked against every now and again in new and original ways, which is, definitely what I felt when reading the Anna puzzle that I was, coming across there. Now, you've talked about the importance of writing from Anna's perspective and ensuring you didn't cross the line into cultural appropriation, which, absolutely 100% agree with you on that one. How do you balance, however, as a writer, ensuring authenticity while still tackling issues that are culturally apart from your own perspective as an author? How do you get the two to marry up, having that distance as an author, but still, you
So
know,
I think it was extremely brave of me to write an ex-KGB male character, but I did not do this off the top of my head. A local author who lives near me, Marilyn Thomas, is a specialist in the Cold War, an honorary research fellow for Cambridge University, and she has written a book about the Cold War that is currently on bookshelves. And I had she read my manuscript, and I had long conversations with her, and she gave me the Russian perspective, and she's quite pro-Russian, and it was quite interesting. I'm quite pro-Ukrainian, and she once said, it's very good, Justine, that we can sit in the same room and have these conversations, and they are civilized conversations. And I said, yes, this is true. But it did give me that uniquely Russian perspective. Now, I wanted the man to appear quite brutal, because what was his profession? He was KGB. He was hardly going to be a man, who sat in a comfy chair and patted dogs on the head. So he's a brutal man, and he's a brutal man from the get-go. But
Sorry, Justine, we just lost you again. Sorry, it was you started to say he sat in a chair and was hardly, and then
he was
again got
hardly
to the
someone who patted a dog on the head. He was
yeah.
a brutal man. But again, I went not only from my conversations with Marilyn, who really enlightened me about the Russian perspective, but also I'd read Le Carre's the book of his George Smiley, the end of the George Smiley series, in which he captures Carla, who is the notorious, Russian agent he's been
Yeah.
trying to get the whole way through the series. And the interesting thing was, how does this little, short, pudgy man, George Smiley, capture the arch enemy, the spy? And it is because he has an Achilles heel. And what is his Achilles heel? It is his daughter, the unknown daughter that he's hidden from the Kremlin. And I thought, it's true. You see, it comes back to love again.
Yeah.
He doesn't want his daughter to be harmed. So I had the same idea. There's this brutal man, and you find out about his life from 1991 onwards. And he has one Achilles heel, and it's very easy to see what it is right from the start. He absolutely adores Anna's mother. And right from the start, Anna's mother is a spy. She's going to be a spy who's going to help. Well, it's her husband, but she's working with him to put information across to Russia, and it's done via Berlin. So Berlin is a big location. Berlin then and Berlin now is a very big location in the book. So he's told to forget about it. What does that mean? But he cannot. He loves her, and he can't shed that. And sometimes I think we can't. We can't choose who we love, and we can't choose to just turn away and say it doesn't matter. A lot of crime in the world is committed because people are jealous because they've
Hmm.
lost love. It's such a powerful motivator. So following from Le Carre, I guess, following through and following all the information that I got from this research fellow, this professor, I constructed that character. But at the same time, I'm also constructing the time zones. What
Hmm.
happened? What happened to ex-KGB agents? People, we all know Putin was
Yeah.
a KGB agent. Look what's happened, what he's done. What happened to all the rest of them? What happened to the whole structure? Well, for 30 years, we thought it was peace. But
Hmm.
these people were there. They were there and they were still working and things were happening. So a lot of again, this underground, the idea that you didn't know what was going on at all. And if you read my book, you do.
Hmm.
But it's through his eyes. It's through the eyes of this man. And of course, I know people have said to me it can be confusing because the agent's name, the KGB agent, called himself Vronsky. That was not his name, that was his code name.
Yeah.
But Anna's mother only knew him as Vronsky. And then, of course, there's the Vronsky in 2021. And I guess that's a deliberate mirroring,
Hmm.
of the gap in time and the two sides of the story. So my apologies to anyone who feels they're confused. The difference is Vronsky, the KGB agent, is spelt as it is in the book. But
Yeah.
Vronsky, the Ukrainian ex-soldier, has an extra I in it because many Ukrainian names, if you look at them, they put in the extra I or Y that the Russians don't have.
Hmm.
When you actually look at how they construct names, they're similar, but they're not the same. So that was, I think, yes, obviously, I am not a Russian KGB person. I have been to Russia, I
Hmm.
have to say. I went before Glasnost when I
Yeah.
was very young,
Oh
and I've
wow.
never forgotten it because it was another planet.
Oh,
Young as
yeah.
I was, the impression I had was I had walked in somewhere so strange. And I had been all over Europe. My dad was in the film industry. So I
Hmm.
had traveled all over Europe. But when we went to Russia, we went to Moscow because he was filming with Sophia Loren. in,
Lovely name drop there. Love
yeah, I'll
that.
just drop that name. He
Yeah.
was
Nice.
actually he was a PR guy. He wasn't an actor.
Hmm.
So we went there and it was like dropping into another planet. So I well remember what Russia was like prior to Glasnost.
Yeah.
I have not been back since. I know Berlin post Glasnost. I know Berlin of the early 21st century. And
Hmm.
Marilyn Thomas told me what Berlin was like in the 1990s, which was really fascinating. And one of the things she said to me was, you do realize they had to connect up the electricity. And it hadn't even occurred to me. You had
Yeah.
East and West Berlin. They were on completely different grids. And the first thing they did when they got together was they had to rip up all the streets to connect the electricity. So, of course, that's in the book.
I mean, Berlin's a city that I absolutely love. I've been a number of times, and I've been really interested in the past about the history of the city. Reading your book again, knowing Berlin in the way I do, knowing the history of the city, it's very clear that locations just as important to you as characters. There's
Yes.
a lot of effort, a lot of detail. Again, authenticity. It's a word I've used a lot, but I genuinely felt that yes, this is the city I know. Whitstable, again, a place I know. Perhaps not as in depth and integral to the story, but again, I felt like I've been there. I've never been to the to Ukraine down to the vineyard, but again, it felt like a real authentic place. So, does location matter to you? Again, thinking perhaps beyond just this novel, obviously your previous works, locations quite specific in there. Let me get that.
Montecatini. I know.
Am I
In
saying
fact,
that correctly?
I had people say to me, "Don't call it that. No one can pronounce it." And some people think there are two Montecatinis. Some people say, "Oh, I've been to Montecatini," and they haven't been to the one I'm describing. They've been to the other
Ah,
one. So yeah, I know it had to be Montecatini. It just had to
mm,
be. I tried all sorts of other titles, but in the end, it was all about Montecatini. So that was a much more straightforward murder mystery novel.
mm,
Why do I write stories? Inevitably, something happens in the world, a little droplet of news, and I
mhm,
begin to construct a story around it. And when I lived in Montecatini for 2 years, it was at the time of the migrant crisis. And, Britain complains 40,000 people came in a boat and it's awful. So, what do you imagine when in Italy 200,000 people came in a boat to
Mm.
Italy in 2016?
Yeah.
Well, some of you may remember back that the Italian Navy was instructed to let the people drown.
Yeah.
And the Pope came on record on TV saying, the previous Pope to this one, and
Hmm.
said, we cannot let the Mediterranean Sea become a graveyard. It's inhumane. And that plus everything I witnessed in Tuscany, the level of migrants who were walking up the beaches trying desperately to get over the Alps, most of them heading for Germany or England.
Hmm.
And principally that was a language thing. Very few of them spoke Italian, and so they didn't want to be in Italy. So all of that sort of came together. And I remember saying to some friends in the town, I've got to set a murder mystery in this town because just look at it. It's dying to have a murder mystery set.
Mm.
So, yes, it was very much the location and the events that drove me for that. And the descriptions, I always say I borrowed the geography, not the people. Nothing
Yeah.
like that was going on in town, but I borrowed the geography because I just thought, I know this place so well. I love it so much.
Mm.
And it was actually Montecatini Val di Cecina, very long name, for a little town based on a hill that looked over the medieval city of Volterra. And Volterra is famous only because it was featured in Twilight.
Mm. Ah, I did not know that.
You didn't know?
Having not watched, yeah, not read or not read the books, not watched the shows. Unfortunately, my daughter's still a bit young for that. I'm sure. I'm
Yes.
sure those days are
Well,
coming.
I was teaching a year group and it just lit up the book. They were all
Mm.
reading it. And at first I thought, is this suitable for them? I thought it was horror. So I read one of the books and realized, yes, it was suitable.
Mm.
So that was that. And I thought, actually, I didn't think much of the book. I thought the film was great. I didn't think much of
Mm.
the book, but the kids loved it. And it was Volterra. So when I wound up going to Montecatini, Val di Cecina, it was like, Volterra's there. Great. So, of course, I've set in Montecatini, one of the sets is that the woman escapes, she's having huge problems. She goes into Volterra and there's a film set. Sorry.
Sorry, Justine, we really lost you then. You disappeared completely. So we just talked about the book and how you'd seen the film. The film was better than the book, and we're just moving on from there.
So I went to Montecatini Val di Cecina and I actually experienced a film crew being there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the weirdest thing. There were people all dressed up. It wasn't actually Twilight, it was a different film. It was Medici, I think, on
Mm-hmm.
HBO or something. And they were all dressed up, in medieval garb, and they'd be standing on street corners looking at their iPhones. It was just weird. Again, it's
Yeah.
this strange thing about life being stranger than fiction. So I had to set a scene where one of the characters flees to Volterra to collect something, and she's there watching the film crews go round because I thought it's too good to miss. Put
Yeah.
it in the way writers do. Oh, I've seen that.
Mm.
Right, let me grab it for my
Yeah.
story. So
It-
yeah, location very very big for Montecatini. The book before that, which was Daisy Chain,
yeah.
was my debut novel, and it was actually again what was the crumb that got me going was I saw a film with Bill Murray as Franklin Roosevelt and
Hmm.
Laura Linney as Daisy Suckley, and it just so happens that Daisy Suckley was my grandmother's cousin, and I'd met her once as an old lady.
Oh, sorry, Justine, we
Yeah, I've
lost you
gone.
then. You were about to tell us she was your grandma's, and we lost.
My
Talk about
grandmother's
dramatic.
cousin. My grandmother's cousin was being played by Laura Linney in a film. The film was
Oh
awful,
wow!
but I have
Right.
to say, I met my cousin Daisy, who was Daisy Suckley.
Mm.
And within the family, one of the things that was said was she'd had an affair with FDR, with Franklin
Mm.
Roosevelt. However, when she died at 99 and a half, they
Hmm.
found under her bed a load of letters from Roosevelt that pretty much looked like love letters.
Hmm.
And yet the biographer claimed she was just, twin set and pearl
Yeah.
spinster, virginal. And the house where I once played is now a National American Heritage House. And everyone does this thing about how she was just a lovely lady who was a friend of his. And she's made out to be quite wet. That's a good
Mm,
English expression. And I felt incensed. I thought that
mm,
isn't the Daisy I knew. I remembered her. That isn't the Daisy my family knew. And I thought, wow, we can do better than that.
yeah.
so, so I wrote this novel. So that this is not a crime novel; it's historical fiction. But I
Mm,
always think to myself, it's always something happens in the real world, and I think I'm going to snatch that and make a story. And because I
yeah.
don't tell short stories, it's a long story. It's a book.
Yeah.
So that's always what I pick up on. And you know, like today, thinking of the poison dart poisons, they
Mm,
found out and put it on the news, and that's what poisoned Navalny. The way my brain ticks is I suddenly had in my head this idea: what if these guys in a lab, and they're all in the lab, maybe a woman as well, and
yeah.
one of them is like, we shouldn't be doing this. This isn't a good idea. We manufacture this. Who knows where it will go? And the others are, don't be silly. You're paid. Get on with
Yeah.
it. And I imagine two of them going out and, having a cigarette and maybe a sneaky vodka, and they're sitting on these snowy, fields or something, and they're arguing about what they should do, and they hatch a plan. So some little thing in the news, and already I'm off. I'm
Yeah.
making another story, and that's how my brain works.
That question of what if, it's the writer's best tool, isn't it? What if?
Yeah.
And just let the idea sort of spin out. Now, obviously, you are, as we've learned throughout this chat, and from our research, well, you're very well travelled. Born in the USA, lived in Rome, Moscow, etc., etc.
I
Uh,
visited Moscow. I've,
visited
I've
Moscow, yeah.
lived in the
Um,
States, England,
mhm.
France, Switzerland, and
Oh
Italy.
wow,
Those are the places I've lived.
amazing! Having lived in those different cultures, having met the different people that you find in these places, does that help for an author? Do you think being well travelled, being well versed in different cultures, different people, different mindsets, does that help you write, especially the sort of fiction that you seem to lean towards? Is that another string to your bow?
I think for every author, unless you're doing fantasy, if
Hmm.
you're doing Fourth Wing and it's sex and dragons on another planet, that you don't need to. But it
Doing
sells.
well at
I
the
know
minute, that
it's really
genre.
popular. I think that's different.
Yeah.
But when you look at the best of fiction, I mean, it's set in different locations. You think of all the Scottish noir
Mm,
there is, that's fantastic.
mm,
I really like some of the Northern Irish crime stories. I'm a big fan of Ellie Griffiths, who wrote about Dr. Ruth Galloway in
yeah.
Norfolk. It just makes you want to go to Norfolk. I mean, there's all kinds of fiction, and it's set. I know Cornwall, really popular location, and
Hmm.
of course Liz Fenwick wrote her dual timelines that end up in Cornwall.
Yeah.
And people love to read things that are from different places where the location is a character.
Hmm.
And I don't think you can write that without going there. I
Mm,
think
yeah.
that's sort of essential. So unless you're writing fantasy, or maybe even I think with romance, you probably need to visit the location.
Yeah.
There is that amount of research. History, it's all historical, but for anything contemporary, you have to have gone there. Now, I couldn't go to Ukraine. I'm going to have to put my hand up and say that. Obviously, I had Ukraine. I had three Ukrainian guests staying with me, and obviously, I talked to them about what it was like. And then on top of that, of course, I did a heck of a lot on Google and searching
Hmm.
out vineyards, which if anyone reads the book, they will find vineyards and wine are very important to the story. I knew a lot about vineyards from Italy, living
Hmm.
on a vineyard. So it was interesting to take that across, and I knew what I was looking for in terms of how do you run a vineyard in the climate of Ukraine and the history of it and that kind of thing. So there's not a huge amount set in Ukraine. It's definitely had to be some of it. But
Mm,
what I did get was done through documentaries and Google and speaking to people who lived there and that kind of thing.
yeah.
You have to do that, don't you? If I had never left England, I don't feel I could have written a novel set in Italy.
No.
That wouldn't have been possible. So I think we all do that. That's not unique to me. That's for everyone. So yes, travel is useful, but like I've never set a novel in Switzerland because I haven't lived
Mm,
there since I was a teenager. I was an au pair in Switzerland,
no.
and I think it must have changed a lot.
Yeah.
I passed through it, to be fair,
Yeah,
because I've driven down through to Italy from England. But I don't know. I would have to go and stay there. So
yeah.
I'm about to go and stay for
Reacclimatise.
a month in France, over in the Vendée. And I know I'm going with another author, and I said, this is going to wind up in a book. This is
I
what I
was
want to
about
keep.
to ask where's in your Expedia list that you're planning to go next for the next adventure to work out where the next
It,
story is going. But France, is it?
it is France, yes,
Yeah.
it's the Vendée. And the characters I've got are English, but they go to the Vendée. They
Mhm.
go seeking someone in the Vendée. So that's definitely going to come out.
So this is the next work in progress, is it? This is what's
Yeah.
coming next.
Yes, it's more of a straightforward murder mystery,
Yeah.
and yeah, but it involves two characters with very disparate wants and needs, and how those two come together. I think if I have to say somebody I love, I very rarely read a whole series.
Mm.
I've actually been on UK, the Crime Book Club, saying I don't often read more than the first three books because I then think I want some new characters. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very impetuous like that. Give me something new. So I haven't written in a series, and
Mm.
I'm part of a small marketing group of indie authors. And it's been said, you want to get your name out there, you've got to write in series.
Mm.
So I'm pushing myself to write at least three books based on the same two characters.
Okay.
One of those books is going to take them to France because it's this idea I can't have it all in the same place. You got to
No.
move around a
Yeah.
bit.
If you're keeping the characters the same, then the locations need to
The
change.
location has to change, and I think Ellie Griffiths did it brilliantly with her Dr. Ruth Galloway series,
Mm.
where it is Norfolk, but then of course she takes you to the north of England, and then of course one of them is set in Italy, which
Mm.
was like my favourite. Let's go to Italy, yay! So yeah, she moves them around a bit. So yes, I have to. If I have this three-book idea in my head, it's
Hmm.
like yes, I've got to move them around. But I also know that in the course of writing it, the first one is at that sort of awkward stage where I have to heavily edit it now. But in the course of writing the three, I know what will happen. Something will come up on the news, and that little drop will come into me, and I'll be thinking, oh yeah, maybe that can happen, and off I'll go.
Yeah. So have you plotted out the whole series, or are you just waiting to see where the first one takes you and going from there? Or do you know where this is going to end up by the end of book three?
I know where the characters are going to end up by the end of book
Yeah.
three, but I'm not quite sure how we get there. I'm a dreadful pantser.
Mm.
I will write the first draft in 3 months.
Yeah.
Write, and have it down, and then put it aside, often going on to another book. And
Mm.
the only thing that gives me courage to do that is Kate Atkinson apparently does the same thing.
Right.
I'm not Kate Atkinson, obviously, but she writes one of these sort of Jackson Brodie case histories, and she against that she has a historical novel, and she writes
Mm.
them both at the same time, or at least she's
Yeah.
said that in an interview. And when she's fed up with one, she goes to the other. Well, I will write a complete draft of one, and then a complete draft of another, and then I sort of poke I poke at them until one of them, it's like, this is it, we're away, we're
Yeah.
going with it. And sort of 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, when I did mention to someone who was a bit of a writing guru, I think I'm going to do this book and it's loosely based on Anna Karenina. They went, oh, that's a terrible idea. I mean, who's interested in samovars and furs and trains? And I thought, oh, okay. But it didn't put me off
No.
when the when the story takes me, it just takes me,
Yeah.
and off I go. But the first draft to the final draft will be substantial change because I am not a plotter. So
Yeah.
do I know the third book in a trilogy? Absolutely not. Do I know the first one? Yes. Do I know the second one? Pretty good idea. Third
Mm.
one, not a clue. I'll have to go to another country on holiday.
I mean, start getting those Expedia pages up and having a look around and see what tickles your fancy. And,
That's right.
it'll
That's
work.
right.
Yeah.
That's it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Justine, we are coming towards the end of our time for our little chat together. So before we go, I would like to give you one more chance to let everyone know about the Anna puzzle, where they can get it.
And yes. And yes, you blacked out there, but never mind. I get the gist of it. So okay, so yeah, this is going to be in reverse, isn't it? Because I've not.
I can switch you round. I
Can
think.
you
Can I do
switch
that?
my camera around? I don't know. So
No,
this is
perhaps
the
not.
no.
No, I
Okay,
don't want to press anything in case you disappear.
that is the Anna puzzle. Now I have put this on a number of platforms.
Hmm.
It's on Amazon. I know everyone's on Amazon, but it's also on Kobo. My proofreader was in Australia, no, New Zealand, and her mother wanted
Hmm.
to read it as an ARC reader, and she said, "I'm only on Kobo," so I have put
Hmm.
it onto Kobo. I've got it with Ingram Sparks. In theories, it's in Barnes and Noble.
Hmm.
It's in a number of outlets. You can't walk into a bookshop and just take it off the shelf because I'm just not important enough, I'm afraid. A great sadness to me. One day we all have
Yeah,
ambitions,
absolutely,
but not at the
absolutely.
moment. But you could order it
Hmm.
through a bookshop technically because it is with Ingram Spark and it's with Gardeners, and most of them take from that. So it is wide, but obviously it's on Amazon, and the ebooks are Amazon and Kobo and Apple.
Hmm.
Apple does a
Yeah.
range in ebooks. I'm trying to get an audio book done because
Hmm.
Apple apparently will take a handful and assist you with it. But
Yeah.
the techie stuff, wow. I talk a lot
Yeah.
about tech in my novel, but it's like some of this is on beyond my expertise.
Well, I will say, having read the book, it is an exceptionally good read. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a very timely read. It's got some great characters, some great ideas, and honestly, guys, I cannot recommend it enough. The Anna Puzzle by Justine Gilbert, definitely well
Thank
worth adding to the TBR.
thank you very much for
No
giving
problem
me
at all.
this.
Yeah, more than happy to talk to you, and look forward to talking to you when the first book in this new series comes out as well.
Give me 12 months.
But we'll have to
No
do a
AI here. It'll take me
we'll
12
have to go and
months.
do a behind the scenes video on location. I feel that
Uh,
could be fun.
yeah, I might do that. Get my video out in
Yeah,
France.
absolutely. Justine, it's been wonderful to speak to you this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me in this slot. Thank you.
Group as well, so do check all the details in the pin posts. And yeah, we shall see you all soon. Good night, everyone. Thank
Good
you.
night.
And that's the stream stopped. Lovely.
Right.
Thank you so much, Justine. I hope that was all right for you. I hope you got everything you wanted to say there.
Thank you.